Khemasiri leading workshop and perhaps a bit of a talk as well included in that on with truthful communication. I purify my speech. So this is the second evening where we're exploring the speech precepts as part of our series on Buddhist ethics, and actually the concluding part. And I think before Khemasiri takes us on a journey tonight, I'd just like to say a little bit about her. What's really striking about Khemasiri, from my point of view, is she's just got this wonderful heart for the centre. You know, she's got a lot of energy and vitality and passion for bringing the Dharma to Nottingham. And I'm always struck by her tireless energy at times just for the centre. And you know, making the centre, the Buddhist centre in Nottingham, a really special place. So thanks, Khemasiri, for all that vision and inspiration that you bring. So over to you.
Thank you. Lovely introduction. Yeah, so it's the second, as Bodhinaya just said, it's the second evening on the fourth precept, the precept on speech. So last week, Kusala Devi did a beautiful evening on that precept. She brought in the 3 other speech precepts that are in the 10 precepts that we have in the Tiratna order. So there's 4 there. And I will be concentrating tonight on truthfulness. The principle underneath the 4th precept is truthfulness. So the other aspects of communication or the other precepts are so truthful, kindly, helpful, and harmonious speech. Yeah, those are the other aspects that we consciously bring into when we communicate, really. And Kusala Devi also gave us the advice of the Buddha on when to say something. You know, truthfulness is not just blurting things out that you think are true. Yeah, so it's actually taking into consideration the situation. How true is it for you? What do you really know? And also, can the other person hear it? That's the other thing. So the Buddha's advice on that is to say something when it's true, or as true as you think it can be, kind, beneficial, so helpful, and spoken at the right time. I think that's really, you know, I think that's one of the things there, is that the other person or people can hear it. Yeah, so the right time. And another element in there that doesn't have to be comfortable or uncomfortable. It can be both a pleasure to hear or not so pleasurable. Yeah, so I think that's the one that stands out. Yeah, so So just wanted to recap on that. So tonight, focusing on that precepts again. So it's called Musavada, Varamani Sikapadam Samadhyami. Musavada is the Pali for this precept. And Musa means false, literally false or dishonest. And Vada is like Vacha, is speech. So Musavada, when we say that in Pali, and when we chant precepts, this means untruthful speech or lying, not telling truth. Yeah. So that's Musavada. Now, how do we know whether something is true or truthful or according to truth? What is truth? What is it? Yes. Now, here I want to ask you all, if you just to take a little bit of time, just only a tiny bit, just to think about it. What would you say if somebody asked you what to describe truth? It's not an easy question, but just going to ask some of you to just say something if you want to. So just think about it for a little bit. Okay. So I have a few minutes to share something. It'll be short, but just to get a few ideas. Anybody happy to have a go? Okay. Gonna leave that there. That's lovely, actually. Yeah, just got you thinking, didn't it? So I've looked at a dictionary, as we sometimes do. Yeah, the Oxford Dictionary, for a definition. And what it says there is, it doesn't actually define truth or reality. It says truthfulness is habitually speaking the truth, corresponding with reality. So you have reality and truth again. And truth, it defines as the quality or a state of being true or truthful, what is accepted as true. So there, doesn't help us much, does it, really? So this is so truth is not really easy to define. Reality is not easy to define. And I suppose in a Buddhist context, what we are doing is we're trying to, truth is what is in line with reality. Again, something like that what Jake just said, isn't it? It's in line with reality, but then what is reality? So this is what we're trying to find out when we're practicing Buddhism. So I'm not going to say much about that, actually, because that's what we do all the time, I suppose, in on these Sangha nights and on retreats. Dharma means, one meaning for Dharma is truth. And one way of looking at it is that it's in line, reality is what is in line with conditionality, that everything is conditioned. Yeah, anyway, I could say there's loads of ways of putting it in Buddhism, but the thing is, like Bodhinaya says, we need to discover it. We need to unfold or dive deep, another way of putting it. Yeah, it's so Sangha says in the 10 Pillars, that book that's on the 10 Precepts, which Kusaladevi mentioned last week. He says one has to dive very deep to discover the truth, even in the most obvious factual sense. And until one has discovered it, one can hardly speak it. Yeah. So one has to dive very deep to discover the truth, even in the most obvious factual sense. And until one has discovered it, one can hardly speak it. So it feels like there's deeper and deeper to go, yeah, to discover truth. And then, of course, we're talking about the principle of truthfulness in this context, but it's also in the context of the speech precept. So we're looking at communicating truth or speaking truthfully. So we can only speak the truth as far as we know it. So practicing this precept, practicing truthfulness or communicating as truthfully as we can is practicing, or that means diving deeper, exploring our intentions, our tendencies, noticing when we are exaggerating or understating, when we are manipulating to our advantage, yeah, when we bring in assumptions. So there you go. In a way, somewhere else, it is said in Buddhism, or Sangha says this as well, in a way, to be totally truthful, we couldn't speak at all until we were enlightened. Yeah, and unless our mind is totally in line with reality. So, but that's not the answer either. We're practicing. So practicing truthfulness is being as honest as we can. And when we practice that, being as honest as we can, just doing our best, in that way we build trust, we build respect, we build goodwill and harmony. The other thing, if we're deliberately turning facts around, spreading fake news, we're very familiar with that terminology these days. What does that do? That brings about disrespect, distrust, disharmony, polarization, fear, and even violence. yeah, that brings about the opposite, doesn't it? So practicing truthfulness really builds community, builds connections, builds trust. So I'm going to look at a few aspects of truthfulness, really. There's so much we could say, so much we could explore, but I'm going to do it through some stories as well. I'm going to read you some stories, Buddhist stories, and some others, or tell you them, and just bringing out different aspects of it. And I hope that that way we just get thinking more deeply about truthfulness. So first, an aspect is interpretation. So how we actually interpret things, yeah? It's really hard to see the whole truth in all its aspects. We often see something only from our particular viewpoint and our particular understanding. Yeah, we often bring assumptions. It's really hard, isn't it, to think of it as objective. we are subjective and we bring that. Actually, that's another thing I wanted to say about Buddhist practice, or the Dharma transcends in the end. Insight transcends that polarity between subject and object. I won't say any more, but just to put that in, yeah. Yeah, interpretation. So I want to read you a story from the Udana. It's a very old Buddhist text, like the Dhammapada. And it's the story of blind men describing an elephant. Some of you will be familiar with it. Yeah, but just sit back and listen to the story. So this is the Buddha telling this story. So the Buddha says to his followers, he says, formerly, bhikkhus, in this very Savatthi, there was a certain king, and the king addressed a man. Come now, my good man, bring together all those persons in Savatthi who have been blind from birth. Yes, your majesty, that man replied. And after detaining all the blind people in Savatthi, he approached the king and said, all blind people in Savatthi have been brought together, your majesty. Now, my man, show the blind people an elephant. Very well, your majesty, the man replied to the king. And he presented an elephant to the blind people, saying, this blind people is an elephant. To some of the blind people, he presented the head of the elephant, saying, this is an elephant. To some, he presented an ear of the elephant, saying, this is an elephant. To some, he presented a tusk, the trunk, the body, the foot, the hindquarters, the tail, the tuft at the end of the tail, saying, this is the elephant. Then, bhikkhus, the man, having shown the elephant to the blind people, went to the king and said, the blind people have been shown the elephant, your majesty. Do now what you think is suitable. And then the king approached those blind people and said, have you been shown the elephant? Yes, your majesty, we have been shown the elephant. Tell me, what is the elephant like? And those blind people who had been shown the head of the elephant replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a water jar. And those blind people who've been shown the ear of the elephant replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a winnowing basket. And those blind people who've been shown the tusk of the elephant replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a plowshare. And those blind people who've been shown the trunk replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a plow pole. And those blind people who'd been shown the body replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a storeroom. And those blind people who'd been shown the foot replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a post. And those blind people who'd been shown the hindquarters replied, an elephant, your majesty, is just like a mortar. And those blind people who had been shown the tail replied, an elephant, Your Majesty, is just like a pestle. And those blind people who had been shown the tuft at the end of the tail replied, an elephant, Your Majesty, is just like a broom. So saying an elephant is like this, an elephant is not like that, an elephant is not like this, an elephant is like that, they fought each other with their fists. And the king was delighted. It's not a very nice king, is it? Yeah. He set them up. So the Buddha goes on, he says, so even so, bhikkhus, are those wanderers of various sects, various sects of spiritual traditions, saying Dharma is like this, Dharma is like that. And then on realizing the significance of this, the Buddha uttered this verse. Some recluses and Brahmins, so-called, are deeply attached to their own views. People who see only one side of things engage in quarrels and disputes. So there's a lot in that story, isn't it? There's a lot we could say about it, but I suppose it's a story that illustrates very well that we only often see a little bit of truth. Yeah, the whole elephant was hard to see. And that's how, for us, it's hard to see the whole truth. Okay. And then I want to show you, I want to say a bit more, I want to show you a clip from a Guardian commercial. Some of you will have known it. Xantika found it for me. I'm going to screen share here. If Zach made me host, he did you? Thank you. So this is a clip from a commercial, and it's quite short. I might show it twice if possible. And you're just seeing things from a different point of view. Okay, let's see. Can you see it? Yeah? Okay, here we go.
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on. An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
Okay. Need to go back to Zoom. Yeah. Sorry, I can't get you all back. Stop screen sharing. Oh yeah, here we are. Is that stopped? That screen sharing? Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, I've got you back. So this shows, isn't it? Because what you see there is, this kind of guy who looks a bit like a skinhead, possibly, yeah, running into a street. And from the other, then you see a man, an older man, quite well dressed, stepping in front of him, wanted to stop him. And then you see that he's actually pushing the man aside to protect him from a roof coming down or something falling on his head. So it's actually, the intention is to save him, yeah? But at first you might, if you only see that first bit, you think, ooh, what's he up to, yeah? So intention, is very important actually in Buddhism. Intention of what we bring to actions is really important. But again, we interpret things so quickly. Yeah, so kind of showing this and the story of the elephant just to really remind us how important it is that we stay open, that we don't hold on too strongly to our views. Yeah, and that's very much the advice of the Buddha. I'll go on to talk a bit about memory. That's the next area. So memory is an interesting thing, isn't it? We think we remember something really clearly and adamant that that's how it is, and that's the truth, and then find out sometimes that it's not, that it was quite different. Yeah, we can't really rely fully on memory because people remember the same situation differently. And we can be so convinced of a fact, hold on to it as a truth, and yet find out that it wasn't true, to our embarrassment, to our sense of humor, depending on how much we emotionally invested in it. So I've got an example there from my life in Holland. I lived with Vajragita, a friend in the order, and she told me that I had already seen a film by Almodovar, which I loved very much. Loved that him as a director. I was about to go and see that film with another friend, and she said, "Oh, you've already seen it." And I was strongly denying that I had seen the film. I said, "No, I haven't." I had no memory of it. And how could she possibly be convinced that I had seen it? How could she say that? Yeah, we were both very, very convinced. And she told me that I even had recommended the film to her after I'd seen it. I said, "No way, no way." So I really strongly expressed that, my disbelief. In the cinema with my other friend, a few minutes into the film, I realized I had seen the film. There you go. I had no memory of it. So I went back home and apologized to Vajragita, and we had a really good laugh about it. Yeah, but it's just what I really learned from a situation like that, from that particular situation, that I don't always remember everything. Yeah. And if somebody tells me that I have to be open, it's much more beneficial for me to stay open to what others tell me, or be open to that I might have it wrong. It was that being so adamant, so convinced that I was right, yeah. But there might be a deeper truth that I was. I was just wrong, just totally wrong, yeah. And then another memory from a film another film I had seen years ago, and I was going to use actually the story for tonight, but I'm not. I think it's a beautiful film. It's a French film called Il y a longtemps que je t'aime. I loved you so long. Some of you might have seen it. It's quite a film on about ethics, really. So I saw it again recently, and I was looking forward to the last scene because that's what I remembered best. Yeah, where this mother cradles her son, 6-year-old son, in her arms, and he's dying basically. And she's a doctor, and she helped him die. She took him away, and they had a lovely weekend, and he died in her arms. And I just had that really vividly in my mind. It's a beautiful scene. But then seeing the film is actually the scene I remembered. I depicted in my mind most clearly, more than anything else in the film. And then when we came to the end, of seeing this film, that scene wasn't there. It just wasn't there. Yeah. What was there was a beautiful description. This mother describing that scene to her sister, but that was the end. She was describing it in words, very beautiful words. So I just, when she described it, obviously saw that visually in my mind, and that's what I remembered. It is just so interesting, isn't it? That again, memory plays tricks with us. Yeah, yeah. So I actually wanted to ask you now, just to, again, have a few moments thinking of a personal example that you might have on this, yeah, where you were convinced of something and it turned out to be different. Doesn't have to be heavy, can be light. Yeah. Yeah. Just think about it for a bit. Yeah, thank you all for sharing that. That's good. Just shows, isn't it? We all probably have examples of so many times how we think we know something and then we find out we don't. I think it's quite sad if we don't find out that it's not true, yeah, or not in line with the reality of others. Yeah, it's quite fun as well. I think it's more like my first story about that incident with Vasha Gita, my friend in Holland, where I was so adamant that I was right. It's that, isn't it? How much it's really interesting when we really emotionally engage with something so strongly, so adamant with views or opinions, convictions. That's when we could really stop and think, what's going on here? Why? Because often there's something underneath there. You know, why are we so invested in it as well? You know, we could unpack all that for ourselves and with help from a friend maybe, because that's where it becomes interesting. Yeah. And actually holding on to people, well, all of us holding on to our own convictions, that's what makes us fight, doesn't it? As we saw in the elephant story, people ended up fighting. Not very nice. Yeah. Okay. I'll just move on a bit because I've got a few more things, more areas. So another area is, as I said before, actually is intention and motivation. Again, it's a crucial part in Buddhist practice. So the same action, something can look the same action can have a different motivation. Yeah. So like the guardian example, yeah, it can either hurt or protect or save somebody. Yeah. So intention is crucial. I'm going to talk a bit about lying as a next thing. So, or deliberately creating a lie. Yeah. Saying something that isn't true. Actually, first come to a story again from the Buddhist tradition. It's in the Lotus Sutta. And that's where sometimes in Buddhism, actually even the Buddha can use a lie deliberately as skillful means with a positive intention. Yeah, so those of you who were at Mitra study with me last Monday will know this story, but I'm just going to read it. Yeah, this is an example here. The parable of the good physician. So this, it's a story, a parable in there. So once upon a time, there was a good physician who was highly skilled in the art of healing and able to cure all sorts of diseases. He had many sons, 10 or 20 or even 100. One day, the good physician went away to a distant country, and while he was away, his sons got into his dispensary and drank some of the medicines there, probably thinking that it would do them good. But those medicines happened to be poisonous, and having drunk them, the sons became delirious and fell to the ground. As they rolled on the ground in their delirium, their father returned. Not all the sons had been equally affected by the poison. Some had lost their senses completely, but others were still able to recognize their father and explain to him what happened. So the physician at once went out amongst the fields and hills and gathered all sorts of herbs. These he pounded and mixed to prepare a medicine which he gave to his sons to bring them out of their delirium. The sons who were still sensible to some extent took the antidote and gradually recovered. But those who had lost their senses refused to take it. The poison had entered so deeply into their systems that they were almost incoherent. But the physician managed to gather from their ravings that they were very glad to see him and wanted to be cured, but that they utterly refused to take any more medicine. Apparently it wasn't very nice, the medicine. Seeing that the situation was desperate, the physician decided that he had better play a trick. He said, "Look there, my boys, I'm very old and the time of my death is at hand. I'm going to go away to a distant place, but I'll leave my medicine with you. If you take it, you'll surely get better, but that's up to you." And off we went, leaving the sons in their delirium. Sometime later, a messenger came to the boys with the news that their father was dead. Believing this false message, which had of course been sent by the physician, who was alive and well, the sons were greatly distressed. "Now our father is dead. There is no hope of a cure," they lamented. Their grief was such that at last they came to their senses. Realizing that the medicine that their father had left for them was good, they drank it and were cured. When he heard of their recovery, their father at once came back to show them that he was alive and well after all. So in this parable, the father is the Buddha. So he uses a lie, or a trick to save the lives of those sons of him who didn't want to take the medicine in another way. Yeah. So here, again, there's much more to the story, but we don't have time to go into that. But here, so the intention of the Buddha using, using something that's not true, like sending a message just to say that he was dead when he wasn't, that's a skillful means, that's a skillful way of using communication to save lives, really, to save beings. And there's other stories in the Buddhist tradition where that happens. Even, the well-known story with Kisagotami, the young mother with her child who's dead, she carries him around, goes to the Buddha because he heard he might be able to bring him back to life, to cure him. And she just can't accept that he's dead. She's out of her mind, really, with grief. And he asked her to find him a mustard seed, which he needs to make a potion to help heal the child. And of course, so that's not a truth, because he goes to lots of houses, to ask for mustard seed. But he had also the Buddha told her that the mustard seed could only come from a household where there hasn't been any death. So every household where she goes, there has been somebody who's died. So, but through that process, she finds that death is something that happens. She realizes that her son is dead and she can let him go. So it's a very moving story, isn't it? But again, it's skillful means by the Buddha. But he doesn't say that he won't make a potion with the mustard seed. He doesn't say that. Yeah, he doesn't say your child is dead. So it's skillful means. I'm not saying now, advising all of us to go lying in that way lots, because at first we have to be quite wise to be able to use skillful means in that way. It's just, I think it's quite interesting that there is wise communication in that way, isn't it? I suppose there is an example, I'm just thinking that now, with when somebody is suffering from dementia. I worked with people with dementia for a while as a carer, and when somebody's in their truth, their world, you don't say to them, "Oh no, that's not true." Yeah, it's totally different, because that can really destabilize them, unnerve them. It's not kind. So I think the principle here is that we also bring in kindly communication. Mm. So there you go. So that's lying in a in a positive way, yeah. But lying, deliberately lying, is very unhelpful. It leads to less and less freedom. We can even be trapped, get really trapped in a web of lies. And there's, if you're ready for it, another story I want to tell you. There's another one. Yeah, a story that's Vasantara writes about in his book, which you all might know, Tales of Freedom. I'll show it to you, that one. Lovely book, actually. Buddhist stories. Mind you, this is not a Buddhist story, but he uses this one. And it's a story of this sailor, Donald Crowhurst. Some of you might know the story. Yeah. It's in 1968. I'll tell you it anyway. So it's a story of in 1968 when there is a race set up to go around the world on your own in your sailing boat, and you can set up when you're ready, set off when you're ready, but you have to set off before the 31st of October in 1968 and to enter this race. And then the person who's done it the fastest in the shortest time is the winner. So, and there's money to be earned. So Donald Crowhurst, so he's English, he enters that race because he's 35 years old. His business is on the verge of bankruptcy. He's married, actually happily married with 4 kids, and but the business is really struggling. So he decides to enter this race. He builds a boat from scratch, and he's the last to set out. Only just before the 31st of October, he sets out. He's made a deal with a benefactor who helped him build the boat, gave him the money. If he doesn't finish the race, he will pay back that money for the boat, and the family house would have to be sold. So that would mean bankruptcy totally, yeah, and no house to live in for his family. So he sets off, and quite early on in the journey, the boat starts leaking. And there's other defects. So he decides there and then, that's an interesting point, he decides to start writing 2 logs, 2 diaries of the journey. One is the true story, or the one where he is staying in the safe waters around South America, on the South American coast. He decides to stay there. And he writes about that. He keeps a log for that, a truthful one. And the other one is the one that he sends out to the world. You know, the BBC is broadcasting his news. His family and friends hear about it. So the whole world, it really hears about it. There's a lot of interest in the race. And that's the one where he imagined that he is going the whole journey around the world. And especially around South Africa, Cape Hope. That's where it's very dangerous there, actually, apparently, for the sea is very dangerous. But, you know, he just has to imagine keeping, it was like he has to imagine what it's like, how long it will take, yeah. But apparently people are getting very excited back home because he's doing really well, yeah. So then at some point what he's planning is to enter the race, to go back to England and enter the race again, yeah. He's still in the race, as he puts it out, but obviously he's not. So, and that nobody would notice that he hadn't actually gone around the world. So, but he intends to come in, not first, but maybe the 4th. Definitely not the first, because that would attract a lot of attention. Yeah, people would want to see the log, and yeah, he would be found out. So it's very difficult, isn't it? So while he is starting to go back, at the same time, yeah, actually at some point he just can't do it. And after about 8.5 months, in July 1969, his boat is found empty. Yeah. So he's likely killed himself. Again, people don't know, but both locks, he left both locks there. Yeah, both his writings were there. So the actual diary was showing more and more of an unstable mind towards the end. He couldn't face the truth of winning and deceit. He couldn't live. To live as a hero would not be easy, because he would know. Yeah. Actually, what I forgot to say is that actually on the race back, when he was entering the race back in, that the two people in front of him who could win before him, then it would be okay. But actually they both, one boat sank actually. So one person, and the other one decided to actually keep sailing. He didn't want to win. He decided to keep sailing. He was a Frenchman, quite a poet and a philosopher, actually a very interesting man, interesting character, but he decided to go on. So suddenly Donald Crowe has found out that he was going to win, you know. So I forgot to say that, that's very important. So yeah, that probably was the reason why he just couldn't really do it. But also he couldn't really live, I think, with that conscience, with that honest conscience that he hadn't really won. So yeah, it's a very sad story in a way, but also a very interesting story. His intention to enter the race wasn't really to, well, he wanted to save his family, isn't it? Well, that was part of his motivation. You know, very, very, very honourable, very courageous. It's also a story of courage. And yet, when he decided to start a lie, and he got himself caught in that web more and more and more, and he couldn't get out of it. Yeah, so, yeah, actually what's a nice ending of it is that, of course, it's very sad for the family. I think it's quite courageous that he actually left both his locks. He did want to find out. He did want to be found out. That's the way to say it, yeah. And also the winner, actually, of the actual race gave the money that he won to the family of Donald Crowhurst, which is really lovely, isn't it? So they weren't, yeah, they managed to, to be looked after. So, yeah, there's a lot more around it. But again, so, you know, when we start lying, sometimes a little lie, it can really lead to, from one to the other, isn't it? And it doesn't sit well. It doesn't sit well. So that's that story. Yeah, we have a little bit of time here. No, actually, I'm going to carry on, and then at the end we can have some comments. Yeah. There's the area of concealment. That's another interesting one. This is heavy stuff, isn't it? Concealment. This is when we decide not to say something, what we leave out. Yeah, it's what we leave out. So actually, it's not necessarily lying, but it's also not saying everything that we could say about something. And that, I think, is very interesting. We can do that in a big way, but also in very little things, little ways. And we might have many reasons for not telling the whole truth, yeah, or saying something not, or not quite as it could be said. We might not want to hurt someone, yeah. The intention might be, we might not want to be found out about something. There might be some shame or embarrassment if we said if we told the whole truth. There might well be fear of what the effect will be of when we say something, not being loved, liked, lose love, lose friendship. Or we might just not be clear. There might be too much emotional involvement into what we could say, yeah? There might be too much reactivity there. So there's a few reasons why I thought, you know, why we don't always say everything that we could say. So there could be fear in there, or it could be because we don't want to hurt someone. Yeah, and then in terms of practicing, so there's so much, isn't there, about communication in this way, if you think of it more and more. So in terms of how do we practice this, yeah, let's put out a few things. Some overlap with what Kusala Devi was bringing in last week. So I think what we need to do is always practice for our communication to be kind. Always bring that in. Kindness, helpful, and again, timely or appropriate. Do our best to be as truthful as we can be, as authentic as we can be. And again, we can only do that to the extent that we know the truth. Yeah. And another area is to really believe another person when they speak as truthfully as they can. Yeah. Like we like to be believed when we speak as truthfully as we can. And notice or bring awareness to our tendencies, our habits. Really notice and bring awareness. And change unhelpful habits and tendencies and strengthen helpful ones. It's not also easy, but there. And this area of leaving things out, noticing what we leave out, what we exaggerate, what we make less of, what we leave out, what we decide not to share and say. I think it's a very interesting area, really. And realize that mistakes need to be made in order to learn. Mistakes need to be made. Practice is a journey full of mistakes and of achievements. And allow others to accompany us on the way, to help us along the way. And remembering that practicing as best as we can builds trust and connection. And I think what I left out here, but I will put in, is that it will help us find truth. There you go. The Buddha did it. Whatever it is, he found that we can't define, but that's the mysterious bit of practicing, isn't it? Practicing the Dharma. Yeah. Okay, that is what I wanted to share. So we've got a few minutes. We've got some minutes for some of you to comment if you like, say something.